Hello, adventurer. It's good to see you. You have made it to the morning grind.
Welcome, welcome.
It's the live stream at the beginning of the Geekverse, where we talk about all types of topics in geekdom, gaming, and fantasy, with an emphasis on being constructive and creating the things that we want to exist in the world.
It's all on the grind, Sizemore. Can't be too fine, can't be too coarse.
That's exactly right. There are a lot of adventures to be had today. Dungeons to explore and monsters to slay, and who knows what a random encounter might send our way. That's why we have to prepare, so settle in now for the morning grind with your favorite beverage in hand.
Tea? Or maybe something a little stronger. I've got a few bottles of the old Wynyard left.
Whatever you want. Pull up a chair.
Dude.
If you're feeling fancy, how about a cappuccino? Or a frappuccino? Or how about an espresso?
Just tea, thank you.
Sounds good to me, Gandalf. Whatever you want. I'm just glad you're here.
Everyone is welcome. You can just watch if you want. You don't have to worship anything you don't want to worship.
Thank you, Mike. But be forewarned.
Sometimes we get really strange characters around here.
Wait, what's that you say? Why can't you come and be a part of the stream?
My wife would disown me.
Oh no, I bet she'll be fine with it. Come on in.
Am I scared for my safety? No.
What are we supposed to do?
Everybody do the secret handshake.
Secret cultist handshake.
Oh, now do wizards who love each other.
This, my friend, is a science.
I still don't have gifts, but it's fine.
It's all on the grind, son. Can't be too fine, can't be too coarse.
Dude, this would be a sick place to bring the band.
Indeed it would be, Dave. It really would. I'm seeing more people coming in. Welcome, glad to have you here. Oh, look, here's someone new.
Is this the cultist meetup?
Yes it is.
Come to hang out? Please accept me. I have nothing else.
Okay, we accept you. Everyone's welcome here.
Brought some snacks.
Well, that makes things even better.
You want some coffee? I don't drink coffee. You sure?
It's cultist coffee.
What makes it cultist coffee?
I'm a cultist and I'm drinking it.
Oh. Then I'll have some.
What exactly is going on here?
I'm seeing more people coming in. Welcome. It's so great to have you. Oh, and look, here comes another stranger.
Can we help you?
Yes, fellow cultists. I could really use some food.
Oh yeah? Welcome. We have donuts.
Oh, it's me. I'm glad I'm here. I'm sure you have a few questions for me, though.
What's your name? Who do you work for? What god do you worship?
Great questions, Rob.
I'm Steve King, and I worship Nyarlathotep.
No, not really. I'm just Heath, and I won't be worshiping anything this morning. But I will be your host. Welcome to the office. We're going to have a great time. I've got my coffee ready, because now it's time for the morning grind.
If you could become a fish, that would be amazing. Then I could command you with my mental fish powers.
Good morning! Well, I don't have my coffee ready. I was just in there trying to heat some up. So I'll have some coffee in just 1 second. I'm going to go and I'll get it as soon as it's heated, trying to heat some up in the microwave. But hope that you are doing well. Welcome to the morning grind. Yes, I missed yesterday, and I nearly missed today. I missed yesterday. I've been trying to get this writing done, and much like Brianna was talking about when she was trying to work on her script, things as a result have not been great over here. I've been trying to just do nothing but focus on it. That doesn't mean that I can just sit and write, but that's been mainly what's going on here. And then I've got my car is broken down as well. So that's stressful. I can try to figure out how to get it fixed. I planned on having that book finished yesterday, but actually turns out that it requires a lot more than just editing. It requires a lot of, basically requiring a bunch of rewriting. And I realized that basically the second half of the story needs to be, which was not previously written, which means that I've been trying to write it. So I was trying to get it done by yesterday. That was kind of the goal, because I've got to get moving on, because it's a Christmas story. This is the Christmas story I'm working on. If you are new here or just coming in, and so in order to get it, get the ball rolling, I'm kind of under a major deadline in order to get it out, because I would like for it to be available this Christmas, which means it needs to be written. But I'm going to give myself today again and this afternoon and see where I can get with it. I like how it's going, but everything takes longer than you're expecting. Just 1 second. Let me go grab my coffee, and then we'll see who all is here. All right, here we go. Coffee time. I need this. Okay. And then I was working late yesterday. I decided I got working back on making shorts and scheduling those for YouTube and TikTok, by the way, and TikTok. In fact, let me bring that up so that I remember to show that. I put some table talk on TikTok right over here. I didn't really know much about TikTok. But let's see who all is here. There you go. Let's see. Good morning. I got coffee this morning. We're also going to do our reading here. Good morning, James. Good morning, Sable. Good morning, Robert. Robert says rudimentary game, like Robert's getting work done. Oh, shut up. That's noise TikTok makes. Okay. Robert says rudimentary game console implemented. 75 turns into a test run. Game persistent for last 8 turns. Plus what it knows from the game console. Cool. If when OpenAI releases 3.5, 30K token, 32K, I think you're talking about 32K tokens here. I'm feeling a wholly persistent experience is at hand. JavaScript skipped skeleton keeps the game on track. I was also saw thanks. I mean, I'm still gonna get together this morning because I was up late. I realized I was up late last night, and I just almost completely slept through the entire morning grind here. I was like, wait a minute, what time is it? Oh my God, I got to get up here. So things have not been good over here. Things have not been good. But what I was saying is that I was watching, I think this was 2 days ago, that DALL-E 3 is being incorporated into Chat GPT. This morning, that Chat GPT is going to get DALL-E 3 in it, and that's interesting. It's interesting. I'm about to do some more work with Midjourney and see what it can do. But having a more conversational style prompting with an AI is going to be interesting. Good morning, Zero the Blade and Brett. There we go. Yep, here we go. I'm trying to get it done here. Turn on the lights. Are the lights not on? Uh-oh. Let's see here. James says, I need coffee too. I need to eat. Rough morning. It is. Sable says, oh, random historical fact. Oh, we like those. The shortest war in history was between the British and Zanzibar. Zanzibar capitulated in 38 minutes. Oh, I need to look that up. That sounds like a great historical factoid. Drinking my cultist morning Red Bull. Good morning. Oh, huh? Are we doing all right this morning? Okay, looks like we solved technical problems. Sorry about that. Okay. Gee, okay. We're having all kinds of issues this morning. All right. Okay, Table Talk. Yes, the Discord link is just right there, which I've got to work with the Discord too. I've got to go back and work with the Discord. And also the Table Talk podcast. Yep. We're almost to 250 subscribers. Let me bring that up. Present. We are at 246 subscribers over there on the Table Talk channel. So if you are not subscribed over there, that's the home of Table Talk. And I was just putting out more clips, scheduling those last night after I got all the writing I could do. Doug has his most watched clip yet for his shorts over here. This one about Obi-Wan Kenobi, the look of Obi-Wan Kenobi, has hit 3,600 views. So that's actually our top watched little short. So if you want to So there we go. That's the most watched short yet. 3,600 views, at least on YouTube. Now, since I had those shorts made up, I was like, excuse me. Hey, what if I don't know anything about TikTok, but what if I put things out on TikTok? So if you're on TikTok and you would like to see Table Talk shorts, here's a link to the TikTok for Table Talk shorts, and we'll just see how things do over there. I have no idea, but since I have the shorts made up, they need to go in different places. They need to go on Instagram too. So I suppose these shorts need to be posted on the shorts feed for YouTube, the Table Talk YouTube channel. I guess they can come over here to Table Talk, to TikTok. This tells you we have 6 followers over here, 437 total likes, which I think is interesting. Because like I said, I don't really understand how TikTok works. I'm still figuring it out. I mean, as far as its structure and so forth. So people have been watching. So its algorithm has been recommending like 818 views, 799 views, 859 views, 883 views. This one, 875 views. And so people have liked it 437 times across the entire thing. So I guess we'll keep track on that too. I want to eventually have to come back and look at some numbers on some of the different projects that we're doing. But anyway, so that's interesting. So that's total likes. And I guess their algorithm also recommends people what they click and they click like on. So I guess we'll see. It needs to go also out on Instagram as Instagram Reels. But I tried posting one of these as an Instagram Reel, and it cropped it weird. Or something weird happened. So eventually we'll have Table Talk shorts on Instagram as well. But I got to figure something else out with that. Over here. So yeah, but I'm really looking forward to getting to 250. 250 is our first major benchmark over on the Table Talk channel. But I'm pleased with how it's going over here. So, all right. So Goodnight Sword as well. I got to work with this some more. Goodnight Sword. I was planning on being able to turn my attention back to marketing, back to all marketing after the actual writing got done with that book yesterday, the new book, but it's not done yet. So I'm going to give myself another day and see where I can get with this writing. On the other hand, I really don't want to have to wait until next Christmas. I really want a Christmas book. But if you would like a free copy of Goodnight Sword, I also put the link down below, but I just dropped it in the chat as well. There is Goodnight Sword. It's my take on Goodnight Moon, the first in the Tales of Rabavania. So if you know a child who is about the right age for Goodnight Moon, but you'd rather have it with a fantasy twist, then check out Goodnight Sword. Like, who wouldn't want to read their kid Goodnight Sword? And you get the free ebook right now. It's the complete ebook. You'll be reading it tonight. Sign up here. You get the free ebook. We'll draw for another hard copy when the Indiegogo campaign goes live. And then still probably in a couple of weeks, we will launch on Indiegogo to get new hard copies of the books printed. All right. Let's do our reading this morning. This is kind of a strange start to the morning. Gee. I think it's because I almost missed it. Let's go over here. We started a new morning ritual with reading we're going to take a look at this book, by the way. This is our, we're going to go and take a look at swords here in the Arms and Equipment Guide. That's our main topic for today. We got 2 swords, so we're going to take a look at swords. But first, let's read about The Art of War, or The War of Art, The War of Art by Steven Pressfield. We are reading The War of Art by Steven Pressfield, just a few a day, just a couple of passages, maybe a day. We were talking about resistance. I was trying to defeat resistance. Resistance is everything that stops you from being everything that you can be. It stops your creative efforts. So this is what we read yesterday. So resistance, like I said, instead of sin in the world, my religion, if I were to create one, would be based around resistance. Resistance would be the enemy. Steven Pressfield in The War of Art says, resistance is insidious. Resistance will tell you anything to keep you from doing your work. It will perjure, fabricate, falsify, seduce, bully, cajole. Resistance is protean. It will assume any form. If that's what it takes to, it will assume any form if that's what it takes to deceive you. Let me just start all this over. Oh, in fact, no, the problem is we haven't breathed and sipped yet. That's the problem. Let's breathe and sip. And then we're supposed to go right into our reading here. So 2 deep breaths and then complete exhales, and then take a sip of your favorite beverage this morning. I got coffee. So here we go. And sip. All right. So resistance is insidious. Resistance will tell you anything to keep you from doing your work. It will perjure, fabricate, falsify, seduce, bully, cajole. Resistance is protean. It will assume any form if that's what it takes to deceive you. It will reason with you like a lawyer or jam a 9mm into your face like a stick-up man. Resistance has no conscience. It will pledge anything to get a deal, then double-cross you as soon as your back is turned. If you take resistance at its word, you deserve everything you get. Resistance is always lying and always full of shit. Resistance is implacable. Resistance is like the alien or the Terminator or the shark in Jaws. It cannot be reasoned with. It understands nothing but power. It is an engine of destruction, programmed from the factory with one object only, to prevent us from doing our work. Resistance is implacable, intractable, indefatigable. Reduce it to a single cell, and that cell will continue to attack. This is resistance's nature. It's all it knows. Oh, Stray gifted a membership. Thank you, Stray. Stray just gifted a membership, and it was received by Neutromancer. So Neutromancer got it. Welcome, Neutromancer. Welcome, welcome, welcome. And thank you so much, Stray. Thank you very much for the gift. Respirate and hydrate. Yes. Joel says, hi, Heath. My son loves the Goodnight Sword book. This is such great press. Wonderful. I'm so glad, Joel. Joel says, hi, Heath. My son loves the Goodnight Sword book. He kindly requests a story detailing the mentioned maiden fair. Okay, I've got information on that. There is going to be a rabbit paint girl rabbit Pate's age. In there that hangs out with him. I actually started to include her in a story about about Clovis. Oh, I had forgotten this. When I was originally writing the Clovis story, which Cameron had rejected and says needs to be rewritten. So it remains at about 80% of that original incarnation. But it had a framing story around it where the story of Clovis, who is the rabbit who first forged armor. So he's like their heroic, legendary, godlike Hercules figure. He was the first one to forge weapons and armor. But it was being told this whole story was being told by an anchorite to a little girl rabbit. So it could be her, but actually it might be also that the maiden fair, the favor that he has could be from one of the damsels, the blood royal, could be over there. Oh, you can't see her, but could be one of the damsels, because the damsels found him. Pate's story is that he is an orphan, and he was down at I was going to write a story specifically about Pate as well. And it was going to be originally incarnation. It was about teaching about weapons and armor. Oh, teaching about weapons and armor. So that's kind of basically what we're talking about with the arms and equipment guide, because Pate was an orphan. He was living at the orphanage, but that every day he would come out and he would watch the knights and squires on the practice yard until eventually he is noticed by one of the damsels, the blood royal, and it's the damsel's job to find rabbits who would become good knights. And so she finds him and takes him down and introduces him to the knights. He's too young to become a squire, but he's taken. So eventually she takes him out of the orphanage and takes him up to the castle, where he becomes a page of the Great Hall to begin with. So she the damsel kind of puts him on the track to become a knight. So actually, I was thinking that the good knight sword is probably like one of Pate's early knights in the castle that he's spending there. Very recently been brought by the damsel to become a page of the hall. The art of war. Yes, I know. I keep saying that. Robert says, resistance is a cruel mistress, harbinger of failure, indefatigable. Yes. Well, all right. Missed a hyphen anyway. Should have put it between go and G. I think the pronunciation comes across just fine, though. All right. Let's go over here and take a look at our book. Let's get on with it. All right. Car apart. So I'm trying to figure out how to get my car running again. Move this over here. Who knows? So I don't know how much longer. This has been a long series on this book, but we will see we'll see what it says about swords and whether or not this is any kind of good information or terrible information. We will see. Joel says, thank you. I thought I would pass that along. He asked me a lot of questions about who the maiden is and why he bears her favor, whenever we read, and I told her I would ask the author. Well, there we go. Yep. So I think that perhaps in that case, he probably has not met the little girl rabbit yet. He's got to, I think he goes, there's something that happens at she's at this chapel, and something happens up there. It's attacked, and so knights have to ride up there. So I'm thinking that he meets her when he goes with some knights, for what, I'm not sure what reason, to that chapel, and meets the rabbit his age. But probably, I think then, if that's an early knight in the castle, then he's probably got one of the damsels of the Blood Royals' favors that she gave to him when she was telling him what a great knight he would be one day. Tom McGrath says this is a deep book. You're talking about the War of Art? Yeah, Broken Car is a big rock. And it's like it's not only a big rock, but it's like a big chunk of metal now that's all of a sudden inoperable outside. I think it's an electrical short in the car, which I'm not an electrician, much less an automotive electrician. So I might have to get somebody to look at it tomorrow on Monday. All right, so let's see if there's any good information in this on swords at all. History of the sword. If you're new here, we've been looking at this advanced book kind of in a historical way as a historical artifact because some of its information is so bad. But it's an interesting historical artifact. It was published in 1991. It references a lot of material that's older than that. And we have such a great, such a better understanding of medieval arms and armor now. And yet, things like this is really where is so influential on the popular understanding of arms and armor. And that's why we perhaps have some misconceptions. We've been talking about all of that. The sword here, it says, the history of the sword. The most common definition of a sword is an edged weapon with a long blade made for cutting blows, thrusts, or both. Swords first appeared in the prehistoric period when humans, who had been using daggers of stone, began working copper. The copper dagger could be fashioned with a long blade. In the ensuing years, the blade got longer and longer. Eventually, the blade reached such a length that it could no longer be called a dagger. This new improved weapon was superior to the dagger, which was relegated to a secondary role in melee combat. Copper eventually gave way to bronze. Swords of varying lengths, what we now know as the long sword and short sword, came into being, with blades ranging from 27 to 35 inches. Sword design was influenced by the dagger. Since the dagger was a thrusting weapon, early swords were also designed for thrusting. Eventually, the need arose for a weapon capable of slashing blows, so swords developed the double-edged still retained a sharp point. Sword handles went through their own stages of development. In Southern Europe, sword handles were decorated with ivory, gold, and semi-precious stones, while in Northern Europe, the handles were decorated with engravings. The discovery of bronze revolutionized sword making. The discovery of iron revolutionized sword making. Bronze was rare, while iron was plentiful, though the latter was harder to work with. The change from bronze to iron was slow. For 3 centuries, both iron and bronze swords were in use. The Romans developed the gladius, a short sword, in order to have a weapon that their rigidly trained troops could use with swiftness and precision. With iron proving itself superior to bronze, the latter was relegated to accessory parts such as the grip or sheath. The Hallstatt culture developed longer sword blades, 31 to 35 inches. Who is that? Hallstatt culture? Is that a Celtic culture, perhaps? Oh, no, it says this is the prominent Western and Central. Yeah, Western and Central. Hallstatt culture is a Western and Central archaeological culture of late Bronze Age from the 12th to 8th century BCs and the early Iron Age from the 8th to 6th century BC. The Hallstatt culture developed longer sword blades as advances in ironwork enabled them to make lighter and stronger blades. These blades were so pliable they could be twisted into a spiral for 3 or 4 turns before breaking. This was known as pattern welding. One drawback of this, however, was the fact the blade could become misshapen when it struck something, often forcing the wielder to stop fighting and straighten it out. Is that trying to say that it was going to spring back, that you could twist it into a spiral 3 or 4 turns, and then it would spring back to true? On the other hand, it does say the blade could become misshapen when it strikes something, often forcing the wielder to stop fighting and straighten out the blade with his foot on a rock. This was the type of sword the Gallic and Teutonic armies used against Roman legions, and is considered a long sword. After the craftsman making a sword placed a trademark, often the craftsman making the sword placed a trademark identifying the maker. James says, I've always liked the stiletto as an idea, easily concealable weapon with no edge, specifically used to thrust with a really thin, sharp point. It's a very specific sort of tool, and I like it. Oh, we do have stiletto over here. Did you see that stiletto was, we kind of skipped it. In fact, I think there was a picture of one. Well, maybe not. Maybe it's next. Well, according to the Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, the stiletto gives the wielder a +2 bonus to attacks against plate, mail, ring mail, chain mail, and all forms of leather armor. Most stilettos are made completely of steel. As swords evolved, a small oval plate was placed between the shoulder of the blade and the grip. This was designed to protect the grip from damage from the metal mouth of the sheath. It also protected the user's hand. And see, your hand doesn't slip up onto the blade. Early stories of famous knights include lore about their swords, even mentioning the craftsmen who made the weapons. Siegfried had Balamus, Roland had Durendal, and Charlemagne had Joyous. King Arthur, of course, had Excalibur. In the Carolingian period, the sword's grip was altered, becoming more specialized and defined. The oval attached to the grip was turned into a four-sided bar about 4 inches long. The oval attached to the grip was turned into a four-sided bar about 4 inches long. This became the guard. The wooden grip ended in the pommel, which balanced the weapon. Such swords measured about 40 inches in length. At the start of the Romanesque period, 11th and 12th centuries, the sword's form remained the same, but the blade became broader. These swords are considered broadswords by some scholars. Oh, there's stiletto down here. Oh, that's what you were talking about. I didn't even notice. The stiletto there, yes, right there. It could be sitting next to coffee or a mug of frothing beer. That's funny. I was like, oh, I think there's a picture someplace. During this period, the sword was used primarily for slashing blows, as reflected in the Bayeux Tapestry, which shows armed men using swords in this manner. The Gothic period saw swords become more specialized, depending on the knight's intentions. The knight's sword was a thing of beauty and strength, and it was this sword that resembles the long sword of fantasy. Knights usually owned several swords, each with their own use. In the 15th and 16th centuries, swords were given to common foot soldiers, and their designs changed accordingly. There were more ring guards to protect fingers, knuckle bows, and other devices. The two-handed sword emerged from this era. What are we thinking about the history of this sword? What are we thinking about the history of this sword? What is able? Is this a pronunciation thing? Let's see. Durendal, Durendana. Charlemagne called Durendana the fruitcake. All the many implements of war to him were in some way feminine. I don't understand. Oh, a quote. It's a quote from Marathon 2. Durendal. That's always stuck in my head. Wasn't Roland. Yeah, I remember the Song of Roland. I was a big fan of the Song of Roland, and I remember Durendal from that because that was Roland's sword. Marathon 2? Oh, this is a video game? Marathon 2 Durandal. Marathon 2 Durandal is a first-person shooter game, part of a science fiction marathon trilogy. It was released in 1995. Is that what we're talking about, Sable? Marathon 2 is the name of one of Bungie's early games, precursor to Halo in many ways. Okay. I thought we were quoting something like the Song of Roland. All right, so the Bastard Sword, also known as the Hand and a Half Sword. I always like bastard swords. Also known as the Hand and a Half Sword, the Bastard Sword derives its name from the fact that it's halfway between the between the two-handed sword and the long sword. Of course, we're going to be using the term long sword and broadsword in here. I like the term arming sword rather than broadsword. I tend not to use the term broadsword. I do like bastard sword, though. One day I'll have to get one. The Bastard Sword has a double-edged blade and long grip, which can accommodate both hands if preferred. The overall length of the Bastard Sword ranges between 3 feet and 4 feet 10 inches. Some Bastard Swords are equipped with knuckle guards, and others have asymmetrical pommels shaped like an animal or bird head. And I had a D&D character, a cavalier, who used a Bastard Sword. The Bastard Sword is an excellent, versatile, edged weapon which can be used one- or two-handed. Using it two-handed gives a warrior better damage potential but makes him unable to use a shield. It's also a slower weapon. Using it in one hand allows the use of a shield but causes less damage, comparable to that of a longsword. Says Lord John Iron Edge, ruler of Hawkhaven. The broadsword, of course, this is, at the time, this is, well, of course, this is so influential on people's use of the term longsword and broadsword. D&D was. This is back in its complete heyday. But I'd prefer to say something like an arming sword. That's what all the rabbit knights have. A broadsword is a heavy military sword with a double-edged blade. Often, sword length is about 3.5 feet. The sword is designed mostly for cutting. Most broadswords have a basket hilt or a shell guard. Oh, interesting. So it's just having that be like, oh, yeah, look over here how they've got that illustrated. They're saying that right there is the broadsword. Interesting. So they're actually looking at that like that almost sounds like a claymore to me. One of the basket-hilted claymores. Because most arming swords do not have a basket hilt or a shell guard. It's kind of interesting what they're actually trying to refer to here. Because if you ask me what the typical broadsword is in Dungeons and Dragons, I would not have said that it was basket hilted. So we're also trying to figure out what they're referring to and what they could have been looking at when they were trying to put Dungeons and Dragons together. Stray says, I named my sword Bastard because that's what people call me after I hit them with it. Or what you call people right before you hit them with it. So, according to this, a favored cavalry weapon, the broadsword is known in different cultures by different names, usually depending on the hilt configuration. The basket hilt broadswords provide +1 bonus to parry maneuvers. In addition, punching attacks done with the basket hilts are treated like metal gauntlets. So that's a very different interpretation, or what exactly it is we're talking about with regard to a broadsword right here. It looks like they're not using the army. Well, we've got Claymore right down here. Oh, so here's their depiction of a Claymore. Claymore can be used to refer to two different things. Like you see the basket-hilted claymores, but then also when I think of a claymore, I think of something that looks like that as well. So it says the broadsword is the broadsword is as fast as a longsword and causes comparable damage to man-sized targets, but lacks the same ability against larger creatures. It benefits, like why? What is that? What kind of sense? I don't understand that. Its benefits in pairing and hand-to-hand combat are good, but to adventurers more of the forget finesse, let's just hack them to bit school, a long sword or a bastard sword may be a better choice. Someone who likes to show off, such as a swashbuckler, would favor a broadsword. This is what kind of interpretation is this? Because I would have said if someone is writing in a fantasy story, forget finesse, let's just hack them to bits. I would have said, okay, broadsword sounds pretty good, but they're saying bastard sword or long sword is a better choice. And it's saying that a broadsword would be good for a swashbuckler. That's very different from how I thought they were going to be going with this. Yeah, the basket hilt on this type of sword comes from Scotland primarily. Right. Yes, like the Scottish basket-hilted claymore. That's exactly what I'm thinking of, which apparently is what they're trying to get you to think of. James says, I'm not a terribly big fan of the basket hilt. I've never done much sword fighting, but I don't think I'd like the sacrifice of grip flexibility for protection. I got used to them when I was SCA fighting. And some of them are just ugly. Some of them are just ugly, but some of them are beautiful. The claymore could be one-handed, although it was still often used two-handed with your offhand cupped under the pommel due to its weight. See Rob Roy for a pretty accurate description. I need to watch Rob Roy again. I remember really liking that movie. It's been a long time since I've seen it, but it kind of slipped under the radar. It's not one that's talked about very much. Maybe it's one that we should talk about on Table Talk one night. Because Rob Roy was a great movie. But I completely missed it. Probably an underrated movie. I don't hear it talked about hardly at all. I watched it because I realized that Rob Roy was another one of Sir Walter Scott's characters. And of course, I think I watched it after going back and reading Ivanhoe, like James is talking about doing now. And so then I realized that Rob Roy was also a Sir Walter Scott book, and then it's got Qui-Gon Jinn in it. I am not firing on all thrusters this morning. Liam Neeson, of course. It's got Liam Neeson in it. And that was a good movie. It was a good movie. I've always thought the claymore to be a hand-and-a-half sword, which is what generally referred to as a claymore, is more of a great sword. See, that was my original understanding as well. Like, talk about like William Wallace's depiction was something like claymore. Let's see how Wikipedia interprets this. For what that's worth. When you just go to Wikipedia, yeah, so like that, to me, that if you ask me who's wielding a claymore, it would be something that looks like that. A 16th century. Oh, this says, well, why would you put something erroneously known as a claymore on your claymore page? This says an early 16th century two-handed Highland sword, popularly but erroneously known as a claymore, in the National Museum of Scotland. So it says it's not that. A claymore is either the Scottish variant of the late medieval two-handed sword or the Scottish variant of the basket-hilted sword. The former is characterized as having a crossguard or forward-sloping quillions, a quatrefoil terminations, and was used in the 14th and 17th century. So there were a lot of different swords that looked like that with the quatrefoils. The term claymore is an Anglicization of the Gaelic, I'm not even going to try to pronounce that, but the Gaelic, which means big or great sword, attested in 1772 with the gloss great two-handed sword. The sense basket-hilted sword is contemporaneous. The sense basket-hilted sword is contemporaneous, attested in 1773 as the broadsword is the broadsword now used, called the claymore, the great sword. Although the OED observes that this usage is inexact but very common. Okay, the 1911 Encyclopedia Britannica likewise judged the term as wrongly applied to the basket-hilted swords. We don't understand which term this is going to. So the Encyclopedia Britannica says that claymore is wrongly applied to the basket-hilted sword. But this over here, it says, see, this says a 16th century claymore. They're using this picture right here as a 16th century claymore. But then here it says popularly but erroneously known as a claymore in the caption. Probably they didn't notice that. So it says the word claymore was first used in reference to basket-hilted swords during the 18th century in Scotland and parts of Europe. This description was maybe not used during the 17th century when basket-hilted swords were primarily military swords across Europe, but these basket-hilted broad-bladed swords remained in service with the officers of Scottish regiments into the 21st century. After the Act of Union in 1707, when Scotland and England's regiments were integrated together, the swords were seen as a mark of distinction by Scottish officers over more slender sabers used by their English contemporaries, a symbol of physical strength and prowess and a link to the historic Highland way of life. Well, here's an engraving of a claymore. Well, wonder why not. An engraving of a claymore and armor at Dunvegan Castle. This is the largest claymore known to have been used in battle, next to two normal-sized claymores for scale. I would be interested to know more about the creation of this particular weapon, because it says so there are a lot of them with this quatrefoil design. Because this says fairly uniform in style, again, for whatever Wikipedia is worth exactly. Fairly uniform in style, the sword was set with a wheel pommel and often capped by a crescent-shaped nut and guards with the straight forward-sloping arms ending in quatrefoils, and langets running down the center of the blade from the guard. Another common style of two-handed claymore, though lesser known today, was the clamshell-hilted claymore. It had a cross guard that consisted of two downward curving arms and two large round concave plates that protected the foregrip. It was so named because the round guards resembled an open clam. Okay. So we've got disagreement on what the term claymore refers to. I had always thought, yeah, this Scottish two-handed sword right here was a claymore. Although some people do use it to refer to the broad-bladed, basket-hilted swords. The Shavana. Oh, I was just talking about the Shavana. I've got. It's probably in the workshop, but my SCA sword has the Shavana hilt on it. Completely anachronistic. For, my armor that goes with that helmet down there. But some of the basket hilts on SCA swords can just look awful sometimes, or often. They frequently do look awful. So I had a friend who would make the Shavana basket hilts for SCA combat, and that certainly does look a lot nicer. Although anachronistic, it looks so much better than like a gigantic plastic basket hilt. My favorite sword is the Shavana, a single-edged basket-hilted sword that was so famous in its day that an entire group of mercenaries was named for it. Schiavana. The CH is actually hard. Because it's Italian. Oh, that's good to know. Schiavana. Yeah, so because I think that's the way I would go with this. Since claymore means big sword, I think that it seems like that would be more appropriate for the two-handed sword that we're looking at. And then it would seem like it had been erroneously then applied to this particular distinctive style of broader bladed sword with the basket hilt that Scottish officers would use, because they got met and then like refer to that as their claymore. That might have been how that came about, because it remained, that particular style of weapon remained in service late. Okay. So, but that is really interesting that they have that particular interpretation of broadsword. So what is the arming sword supposed to be? If you just want your AD&D character to be carrying a classic arming sword, what are they supposed to be carrying? That may be what they're calling a longsword. I bet that's where we're going to go. We'll see if that's where we go. So our discussion into claymores was fitting, because claymore is next. Claymore. The claymore is a large cross-hilted sword consisting of a straight, broad, double-edged blade and long quillions angling toward the blade. So they are definitely using the claymore in this sense over here. We got a picture of it as the two-handed weapon. The grip is leather covered and topped with a wheel-shaped pommel. They mentioned the wheel-shaped pommel here. The sword is slightly shorter than the two-handed sword. The sword is slightly shorter than the two-handed sword. Claymores are treated as bastard swords in terms of damage, weight, and weapon speed. Claymores are great swords of Scottish origin used by Highlanders and Scottish mercenaries in Ireland. The sword was popular from the end of the 15th century to the early 17th century. The term claymore is from the Gaelic, and the word I will not even try to pronounce, meaning great sword. The cutlass is a sword with a single-edged, curved, broad blade attached to a basket hilt. The blade is short and heavy. The sword is favored among pirate crews. They talk about heavy swords quite a bit in this, I've noticed. The sword is favored among pirate crews and is easily found in port communities, but rarely inland. For like what reason? Its early cutlass users enjoy the same advantages in parrying as broadsword users. Cutlasses cause damage compared to short swords, but are slower and heavier. A broadsword is a better weapon since it gives the same parry benefits and causes more damage, says the first mate Arlandar of the galleon Angel Wing. Now, falchions are underused. I like falchions. One of these days, I'll have to get a good falchion. The falchion is a sword with a single-edged heavy blade. Its blade back is usually straight, while the edge has a curve. The blade also broadens close to the tip, which gives the blade a cleaver-like appearance and increases the damage inflicted. The sword is heavy, which contributes to a fearsome cutting blow. Once again, another heavy sword here. Sable says classic arming sword would be a one-handed sword with a blade that's wide at its base and tapers straight down to a severe point. What would you then call like one of the a sword that's worn by the Norman knights? Classically, Gladius. The Gladius is the first refined version of the short sword. It has a double-edged blade and a strengthened tip. The grip is made of wood, bone, or ivory and topped with a round pommel. The sword is carried on the warrior's right side, slung from a baldric passing over the left shoulder. In terms of damage and length, the gladius or drusus resembles a short sword. A drusus is a gladius of exceptional quality and consequently has a series of special things associated with its care in order to maintain a sharp edge. The restrictions are listed in the Complete Fighter's Handbook Equipment chapter. I have never heard that term before. Let's see. Well, no, let's see. Okay, Wikipedia says it doesn't really have anything on that. People's names. The Norman sword would call it as an arming sword, sure. So that's what I would typically call an arming sword. This book would call it a broadsword. I'm having trouble figuring out exactly. So a Norman sword, let's look for that. I'm not sure that looking at this, I would have said that the Norman sword would have been a broadsword. But when I read this description, it doesn't sound like what it's supposed to, what it's referring to with the basket hilt and things like that. It says most have a basket hilt. Yeah, it doesn't say all does, but for some reason it does really talk a lot about this hilt, but it doesn't say that it has to. So I guess it could, but it doesn't emphasize it. But I still think it's an odd thing to emphasize over here. If I'm writing an AD&D book, like a sword would be something like the Norman sword, the Norman arming sword. And I would emphasize that under broadsword if I had to use the term broadsword, I guess. Let's see. Equipment. New weapons. Variant armor. Unless it's under gladiator armor. They go into a lot of, I guess this book here, here's like belaying pin. Like we saw belaying pin in this book. So this book came first. When did we say this book was published? Was this 1985? No, 1989. Oh, see, not that long before it. That's interesting. This is only 1989. The Complete Fighter's Handbook here. This is only 1989. It's only a couple of years later this came out. They've got a lot of information about weapons in the Complete Fighter's Handbook. It's kind of interesting they decided to go and create this other book not all that much later. So here is Drusus, D-R-U-S-U-S. The Drusus is a gladius, short sword of exceptional quality as per the types of weapon quality described in the character creation chapter of this rulebook. It looks just like an ordinary gladius. Only by testing its sharpness of the blade can someone tell the difference. The Drusus has been forged so that the metal is better tempered and holds an edge better, and then sharpened until it has a razor-like edge. Because of this, it does +1 damage and confers a non-magical +1 to hit over the normal gladius. This means the wielder character gets +1 to hit when using the weapon, but the weapon does not give him the ability to hit monsters which require magical weapons to effect. The Drusus also has a disadvantage. In order to keep its keen edge, it must be regularly sharpened with a lot more attention and time than an ordinary weapon requires. After any day in which the Drusus has been fought with, even one attack, someone will with either the armor or weaponsmith secondary skill or the blacksmithing, armor, or weaponsmithing non-proficiency must sharpen the blade for half an hour. Or on the next day, it will act as an ordinary short sword, losing its to-hit damage bonus until it is sharpened. Exposure to high heat will ruin, such as a smith's forge or dragon's breath, will ruin the temper on a Drusus, turning it into an ordinary short sword and forever destroying its to-hit bonus and damage bonus. The Drusus uses the same weapon proficiency as the short sword. If a character can use a short sword, he can use a Drusus with equal proficiency. Weapon specialization with one does not transfer. With one does transfer to the other. In cultures where there are gladiators, any weaponsmith with a weaponsmithing ability check of 14 or better can make a Drusus for the cost shown. The weapons are seldom exported as local demand is high enough for the few made. A foreign weaponsmith could not make one merely if it were described to him. He would need to study with a local weaponsmith. Having done so, he could then make the weapon. A Vorpal Gladius, that's what it sounds like. Imagine having fighter as your job description. Sounds like that would be an MMA thing, right? I was thinking, who do we call a fighter today? I guess the MMA people. These are like, I guess that's an okay. Well, actually, I think it's kind of a lousy falchion here. Here's the Khopesh. That's a bizarre depiction of the Khopesh, is it not? Yeah. The Khopesh is the Egyptian sickle-shaped sword that developed from battle axes. It looks like somebody tried to, this description right here. The Egyptian weapon has approximately 6 inches. See, Khopesh. This Egyptian weapon has approximately 6 inches of handle and quillions. The blade extends straight out about 18 inches from the handle and then curves into a slight sickle shape for another 2 feet. In effect, this only adds another 18 inches to the overall length. The entire sword is usually made of iron or bronze. That sounds like somebody had never seen one, or this looks like somebody had never seen one before and was trying to figure out what it was supposed to look like from this description. The Khopesh is a slow sword, heavy and unwieldy. Its damage is unremarkable as compared to other swords, especially when one realizes the drawback that must be suffered when wielding the Khopesh. All in all, it's a primary weapon of a culture that has not grasped the finer techniques in swordsmithing. Still, the weapon resembles a sickle in some ways and is usable by druids. This gives the nature priests a chance to wield a sword, yet stay within their weapon restrictions. It says, Ibelin Halath, a warrior priestess. Candace, that's a very poor Khopesh, yeah. Candace is an Egyptologist. She'd be angry at that one. I love the fighter class inspire the city must fall. You're not a fighter with a drinking problem. You're a drinker with a fighting problem. Zero the Blade says MMA is more D&D monk than fighter. Yeah. Monk in the D&D style. But as far as what we use the term for, if someone says they're a fighter, that's all I came up with. We're talking about MMA fighting. Yeah, Sable says that's not a Khopesh. I don't know what that is. I've never seen anything that looks like that. It sounds like somebody, yeah, it looks like the artist had never seen one. And whoever was doing the art direction had never seen one as well. Yeah, so is this over here. Here's the Wikipedia Khopesh. 18th century BC. 18th century BC Khopesh found near Nablus. The blade is decorated with electrum inlays. Well, I'd like to see some other pictures of it. It says a typical Khopesh is 50 to 60 centimeters, 20 to 24 inches in length. Those smaller examples exist. The inside curve of the weapon could be used to trap an opponent's arm or pull an opponent's shield out of the way. The weapons changed from bronze to iron in the New Kingdom period. The earliest known depiction of a Khopesh is from the Stele of the Vultures, depicting King Inatum of Lagash wielding the weapon. This would date the Khopesh to at least 2500 BC. Classic Egyptian look. Especially for, yeah. I mean, when you see this, kind of like the chest patch being Norman armor, you definitely think Egyptian when you see something like this. Lots of people have had different kinds of interpretations on it. Oh, I think I'd seen this on YouTube. 5,000-year-old Khopesh bronze casting, and now I'm going to have to watch that YouTube video now. Also, probably some bad interpretations of the Khopesh. But there's one. Okay, so there's a Khopesh in the Liberty Biblical Museum. But not nearly as bad as what this illustration is in this book. Yeah, sword and axe, what they're talking about here. You can see the inspiration, the axe inspiration in there. Offset curved blade, more of an axe. You can see the influence of the axe. I see why in D&D terms, somebody would be writing this and go, oh, look, it's sickle-like. But it's definitely more axe-inspired. But I guess if you're looking for more D&D stuff and you see that, now you would not think that was sickle-inspired. This, whatever this is, you would not think that was sickle-inspired. But some kind of weird religious restriction over here. Well, it kind of resembles a sickle, so we let druids use it. So a longsword. Now we get into, what is this book called? A longsword. A longsword. These swords are usually referred to as double-edged swords, war swords, or military swords. In many cases, the longsword has a single-edged blade. In many cases, the longsword is a single-edged blade. There's no single version of a longsword. The design and length vary from culture to culture and may vary within the same culture depending on the era. So it's got over here the longsword with this tapering blade, like you were just talking about, Sable. Looks like what Excalibur, it looks like the Lady of the Lake drawing it. Among the most common characteristics of all longswords is their length, which ranges from 35 inches to 47 inches. In the latter case, the blade is known to take up to 40 inches of the total length. Most longswords have a double-edged blade. Well, we just read over here, in many cases, the longsword has a single-edged blade, but that most longswords have double-edged blades and a sharp point at the tip. Despite the tip, so they're not even sure what they're talking about. I'm not even consistent with whatever it is they're talking about. Yeah, now see, that's, yeah, what is the war sword? A totally anachronistic term as far as I know, Sable says. That picture is depicting an arming sword, not a longsword. I mean, a lot of people use the term longsword now for a much later period weapon. This book is definitely confused on, if it's trying to make these different classifications, it's doing it poorly, which has been our problem in D&D and fantasy for a long time, probably stemming from this era and earlier. What exactly it's trying to talk about, we're not sure. Because I can definitely also see somebody saying that, like, the Norman arming sword, maybe that's what D&D would call a longsword. I think that a lot of people in D&D use that term, like that word, in that way, or this term in that way. Often the longsword has two grooves that run the length of the blade, one on each surface. These grooves are called fullers and are meant to make the sword lighter and more flexible. If a sword did not have some elasticity, it would shatter when it hit a target. The handles of all longswords fit only into one human-sized hand. Most longswords have a small oval metal plate between the blade base and the grip. The oval protects the grip from getting damaged against the metal in the mouth of the sheath. It also offers some modest protection to the hand. The second piece of metal, either oval or round, is fitted onto the pommel. Ah, the longsword, a warrior's best friend. It is without a doubt the most common melee weapon among skilled adventurers, and rightly so. It inflicts a reasonable amount of damage to both man-sized and large opponents. It's fairly fast for its size, and it's relatively light. Elves favor longswords and are trained from childhood with its use. One guess as to the reason for this is the fact the sword is light and quick and can cause a lot of damage when in battle, much like the elves themselves. That's only a guess, of course, and the truth may never be known, or at least if I have anything to say about it. Lord Noro Goldentree, High Elf. The classic longsword depicted in fantasy gets its design, it says, from the Gothic period. This is the longest variety of longsword with a 40-inch blade. I know. I thought they were coming for that, too. They could have. Sable says, at least they didn't call it a blood groove. That would have been exactly the kind of thing that I was expecting this book to do. Tomocrat says, I have always seen the longsword the sword from the movie Excalibur as the classic longsword. And that was clearly their inspiration right here. What does Excalibur look like in the movie Excalibur? Ah, yeah. Hang on, I'll bring it up. See, and I think you're probably right, and I think that this is probably what a lot of people. This is the legacy arms interpretation of Excalibur. I've seen people make reproductions of this sword on YouTube. Well, can't type. Adam Savage. Yeah. Adam Savage did one. He went to a lot of trouble to try to replicate exactly this sword as it appeared in this movie. Adam Savage shows you how to make the perfect Excalibur replica sword. That was a great YouTube video when he was making this as this replica sword. But yeah, I would agree. And something like that right there is probably what a lot of people think or intend for their D&D character to be wielding when they say that they're using a longsword. That would be my guess as well. And what's trying and it appears what is often trying to be described in this book as well. Did I not have this? Did I not have it up? Oh, sorry. This being Excalibur. Like I was saying, if I didn't have it up, that's kind of a bad interpretation of that particular movie weapon. But that right there, if I didn't have it up, that right there is what I think most people expect their D&D character to be using if they're using a longsword. Zero the Blade says fullers allow for a stronger core when cooling the sword, if I remember right. Only the overhead cam is showing? Huh. On my screen, it does have it up. Huh. Well, now do you see me? According to my streaming software, that was up. Let's see. Well, I think we might actually leave it right there for today. We've still got the classic short sword to go. And we'll have to talk about Warhammers. I like Warhammers. Look at this weird helmet that's got sitting next to this Warhammer. Well, sorry about the error with that then. So that's what I was trying to show. I wonder if it's showing now. Okay, well, I am going to try to get some writing done. I'm going to see if I can, if I'm going to be able to finish the story or not today. All right. Well, everyone, please go be productive. I'm going to go right, and I'm also going to see if I can get my car started this afternoon. So, everybody, it was great hanging out with you today. I wonder why that isn't working. All right, it was great hanging out with you this morning. Tomocrat says, I love learning about weapons. So I will see you guys later. Go forth, be creative, be productive, and grind on. Later, everybody.